Welcome to Big in Biz with DiViz. My name's Craig DiVizzio. My guest today was Johnny Howze III. We talked about leadership and how important it is to really focus on caring about your people. If you care about people, a lot of other things take care of themselves. He also talked about the transitions that he made over his career and how he evaluated whether it was the right time to make a move or not. Lots of great leadership tips from Johnny Howze. Stay tuned to the show. Welcome to another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio, president of DiVizzio International, and my guest today is Johnny Howze III. Johnny and I have known each other, well, as we said prior to the show, we go way back.
Way back.
We've known each other over 20 years now, and I remember, and I'm not sure if you were in leadership at the time we met, but I remember our first real meeting and talking about leadership revolved around a course that I had taught, and at the end of the course, Johnny came up to me and said, I want to take you out to dinner and pick your brain about leadership. Well, there were a couple of things about that were attractive to me. One was to get a free dinner, and the second one was somebody who was interested in gaining every bit of knowledge they could about leadership. I don't know if you were in leadership at the time or not in the leadership at the time.
No, I was just starting. It was my first leadership role when we met, and we used to have these first-time supervisor classes. And I think that's where we met, and it just took off from there.
Yeah. I just have to give you the heads up. Johnny and I have for years called each other brothers from another mother. We don't necessarily talk that much. We don't communicate that much. One of the things that is so special to me about this relationship is that whenever we need each other for something, we know that that's one person that we can count on. Mm-hmm. Let me read a little bit about where Johnny's been, and then we'll invite him to the show. And I'm excited to hear his thoughts on leadership because he is certainly a fabulous example of that. Johnny is currently Vice President of Supply Chain Operations, responsible for supporting Southern Company gas and supply chains generation, power delivery, nuclear, fossil and hydro, data analytics, and enterprise service groups. Previously, Johnny served as the plant manager for Georgia Power's Plant Sharer, which can supply enough energy to power over 2 million homes annually. Under his leadership, Plant Sharer was named the 2017 Powder River Basin Coal Users Group Plant of the Year. Since joining Southern Company in 1990 as a summer student, Johnny has served as the plant manager for several plants at Georgia Power and former subsidiary Gulf Power. He earned a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama and completed the executive MBA program at Kennesaw State University. Throughout his career, he's been active in the community with organizations such as United Way, the National Society of Black Engineers, and American Association of Blacks in Energy. He's currently Southern Company's executive sponsor of the National Society for Black Engineers. Johnny's married, has 2 children. In his spare time, he enjoys collecting contemporary African American art, traveling, and the last one I know he enjoys, he's on that golf course as often as he can be.
Absolutely.
Johnny, welcome to the show.
Absolutely, partner.
Welcome to the show, brother.
Glad to be here. You're a special person to me. We go way back. I was not going to miss this invitation when you called me.
I appreciate you coming and being here in person with as many Zoom calls and Skype calls as everybody's been doing. It's good to see you face to face.
Absolutely.
Let's go way back. I want to find out, and I don't know that I've ever asked you this question, about leadership. Did you always know from an early age you wanted to be in leadership? Was it something, a transitional experience where somebody inspired you and you went like, man, or maybe the opposite of that. Maybe you didn't see great leadership and said, well, maybe I got to fill that space. What was it about leadership that got you initially interested?
Well, I think it was a mixture of a lot of different things that you just described. Being a young leader and you're seeing some gaps in the organization and gaps in teamwork, gaps in achieving certain outcomes, and you just say to yourself, hey, I can help in that space. I know a little bit about it. I got the relationships. I can help from that perspective. Obviously, there are always people that inspire you, people that you look up to, that you want to emulate. So that was a big part of it. And then last but not least, and I can only say this now as I reflect back upon life, but I think about a lot of my experiences of how I got through the University of Alabama, whether it was running my own jazz band, or I think I had 4 jobs, and just things like that where you didn't think was leadership. I didn't think at the time being a resident assistant, an RA in the dorm was a leadership role, but it was. So as you reflect and you think about all those experiences, you realize you've really been in leadership a long time, just from a different perspective. So I don't think I woke up one morning saying, hey, I want to be a leader, and hey, here's how I'm going to do it, and here's the right way to do it. You just jump in with the want to just do more, the ability and want to help people, that ability to help people, and just that's just kind of how it just evolves. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a choice. It just kind of came like that. So, and it's been a great ride. I mean, very rewarding because it's about people. And you realize along the way, the more people that you help, the more inspiring and just the more you get out of this type of role.
Yeah. I wanted to follow up on that because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, how would you characterize your leadership style? So already we know that it's about people, but if you had to share, if you were in an interview and saying, let me tell you about my leadership. I don't know whether my leadership style matches up with the way you want to be led by a leader, but this is my style, and I've found it to be fairly effective. What are some of the key components of that, Johnny?
Well, for me, the first thing is just be who you are. Be transparent. Be honest with people. That's the best trait that a leader can have. Employees and teammates, they can see right through people when they're fake. I remember young in my career, that the young days, I could see through certain leaders, and I knew what they were telling me just wasn't going to cut it, but you just deal with it. When you see those types of things, you realize you don't want to be that kind of person. So it's so important to be transparent and just be who you are, particularly in today's times where it seems like the buzzword is we want employees to be their authentic self and bring their whole self to work. I get fascinated sometimes when I hear that so much today. I'm like, how come we didn't hear that 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when people were trying to be their authentic self and bring their whole self to work? So I think that's a very important key when you talk about my style. The other thing in terms of my style is I'm going to communicate. I believe in communicating. And it's not talking at you, it's talking to you. And it's not talking about business all the time. Because at the end of the day, it's about building relationships with everybody, up, down, sideways in the business. The better the relationships you have, the more effective a leader you can be, because people trust you. People know that they will have their best interests at heart when it comes to you being a part of their team. So I believe in those things. Those things have always stayed with me. I've tried to stay true to those things for a long time. And obviously there are more things I can talk about. But as of right now, those are at the top of my mind as I think about your question. And I'm pretty sure as we go through this process today, there'll be more things that are going to come out, no doubt.
Well, you talked about communicating, and I know that in the leadership feedback course that I teach,
Yeah.
one of the real challenges for leaders is communicating things that they anticipate won't be received well. and I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, because obviously in all the positions that you've been in, there's been lots of change in the organization, and it's on you as the leader to communicate those changes. let's say some of them not well received by people. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, the main thing that I tell a lot of people that I mentor, as a leader, you have to be a student of the business. You have to know as much as you can about how the business is operating and the trends of the future so you can see around the corner. When you see around the corner, you know when you're going to have to communicate something that's not so positive. It may be a month away, it may be 6 months away. I've been in positions where I knew in 2 years I'm going to have to deliver a message. That time frame is so important because that's your time frame to prepare whatever team you're leading. It's time to prepare them to receive the message. No one wants to be blindsided by any bad news or by any challenging news or a tough message. Nobody wants that. But when you have that opportunity to drop some seeds because you know something's coming, and you learn that by being that student of the business and understanding business trends and things like that, so that speaks to your personal development as that leader. You get that opportunity to prepare everyone for that message. So when you deliver it, you can deliver it succinctly. You have a great platform to start talking about why, which is the second important point, preparing the audience to receive the message and really be good at explaining why this is happening. The why is so important because when employees or teammates leave the office or the plant or wherever for the day, it doesn't end. And a lot of the decisions that we communicate, they'll take it home. And when they take it home, you have to understand that they're going to come back in the next morning with more questions. But the better you are as a leader at explaining why this is happening or why this decision is made, it helps with that whole after effect. So I just think about those two things there, Craig. They're so extremely important when it comes to communicating.
You know, you mentioned dropping seeds along the way. That would suggest to me that you're not one of these leaders who, where's Johnny today? Well, I don't know, I haven't seen him in a week, haven't heard from him in a week. It's like, is he even around anymore? There, unfortunately, I think, is a mistake that a lot of leaders make, is that they lead from afar, so far out that people don't really have anything to trust. You haven't even told us anything. You're not communicating with. Sounds to me like you're bent on staying in touch with people along the way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Again, part of leadership is talking to people every day. I mean, really, really talking to people. How's your family? What did you do this weekend? What's going on next week? By the way, did this pump get fixed? Did you do this work order? Oh, thank you. Just wanted to know. Don't want to ask any more questions about it. But just letting people know you're paying attention, but you're really concerned about them.
Touching base with them in a way.
That's it. That's it. And the other thing is meeting people where they are. It's one thing to communicate one way and just communicate messages, but everybody doesn't like to be talked to the same way. Everybody requires a different tone, or it's a different way you approach them, or so forth. It's so important to understand that as you deal with people. This is a quote I use a lot in the office. I tell people, you can't engineer a culture. You have to grow it and nurture it. And it takes dropping those seeds on every relationship that you've built to be able to impact people, whether it's up close or from afar, however you decide to communicate. If you've dropped those seeds and built that relationship and they've trusted you, then it makes my job easier. Makes it so much easier.
I had a gentleman in my leadership class, as I was suggesting that they do what we've been talking about, stay in touch with their people, even if it's just a, hey, how you doing? Stop by the desk, everything going okay, whatever. Doesn't have to be a long conversation, but stay in touch with the people and give them the communication / feedback that they need to be successful.
Oh yeah.
Whether that is a pat on the back at times, or whether that is some type of corrective discussion, or maybe even a discovery discussion around what the heck is going on. I don't really understand, so I'm not going to criticize you necessarily, because I got to first figure out what the heck's happening. And I'm interested in what you would say to him, because I remember what I said to him. And he said to me, Craig, I'm an engineering manager, and I know you're an engineer, so you know from where he's coming. He said, I'm an engineering manager, and I also have projects of my own that I'm doing in addition to my leadership role. And my projects are taking so much time, I don't have time to get around to the people and communicate with them. Now, if you want to see smoke coming out my ears, you would have seen it then, but I'm interested in you having worked with a lot of engineers, and you know that that is the philosophical approach to leadership that they take. How would you advise them?
The first thing I'd say is that there's a high price to leadership. Leadership is not easy. It is time consuming, and there's never going to be enough time. But you have to prioritize just like you do in any other engineering project. And when it comes to leadership, if you're a leader of engineers, people still come first. Everything starts with people. The projects are going to be there. You know what the deadlines are. When you are a single contributor engineer, we all work late on projects, so you're going to have to do the same thing. You deal with your projects after you deal with your people. But most importantly, if we think more broadly and bigger about the issue, yes, he has some big projects that he's working on. But if you get your people involved in helping you achieve the results on those big projects, then it's less of a burden on that guy's the leader. Number two, he is developing some of the other people on his team that are helping him create those projects. They're learning. He's getting the work done because we're paid to get things done through people. We don't have to do the projects. If he does those two things, I would say, hey, this is better for everybody. You're developing other leaders, developing other engineers. You're getting your work done. The teamwork's going to be better. You're going to have more momentum in the department and so forth. It gets everybody involved. And when everybody gets involved, then you can move mountains in the business. People are having fun. That's what we did in one of my old jobs. We got everybody involved. And I used to tell people that if you don't get involved, it's your own fault because you're missing out on all the good nuggets and the good things that this team's creating.
Yeah, I'd like talking about those leaders who have forgotten the fact that they are as successful as they are because of the people,
Absolutely.
the team that contributed to helping them become the successful leader that they are. Sometimes leaders get in a position where they love the glory spot and they love all the attention, and it's like you got to realize that the team they're doing most of the work there. You know, you're as good as you are because of your team.
That's right.
Or as bad as you are because of your team. What's one thing that if you see new leaders, and I know, you know, I mentioned at the beginning of the show that you came to me and said, hey, I want to pick your brain about how to get ahead in leadership. I am absolutely certain that you have a lot of people coming to you asking you that very same question. What are some of the things that you're suggesting to them to do that please avoid this like the plague, because this will end your leadership career in a heartbeat? Or if you're going to invest your time and energy in one thing, baby, here's where I'd put it.
Yeah.
What would be a couple of those?
The main thing I tell people is focus on the relationships with those that are directly around you. And if you instill that positive energy, that positive enthusiasm, the spirit of optimism, if you put that in the people around you, it's amazing how that becomes contagious and drifts throughout the rest of the team and organization that you're blessed to lead. The spirit of optimism is contagious. I love to tell people that. Once you do that, I tell people things after the relationships, really get to know what people know. I always tell people if you have a chance to build your team, don't build it like you. We all have
That's
to.
an interesting one. Tell me a little bit more about that one.
So we all have to play the hand we're dealt. I'm a card player, so I always have to play the hand I'm dealt. But through time, you're always going to have turnover on your team. I'm going to take another card out of my hand. Well, when that happens and I got that opportunity to put somebody else on the team, don't put somebody on the team that you like because that's your friend or you're cool or you know they got your back. Because at the end of the day, there's still business results that's got to happen. And for me, I'm a mechanical engineer. It's funny, I'm a mechanical engineer and I worked at a power plant, but I'm scared of electricity. I like stuff I can get my hands on. I can stand on top of a pump or stand on top of a turbine, but when it comes to electricity, I point like I'm not going over there.
I was going to say, we're never going to hire you as a lineman.
Right, I would never be a lineman. But at the end of the day, I would love to have somebody on my team that was that lineman. Since I'm never going to be that lineman, no, I can't be that lineman. But I value what that lineman thinks, and I need that experience to make the team better, to make my part of the business better. So that's why I say don't hire somebody like you. Go out of the box and get somebody who's probably the opposite of you in a certain area or has a skill that you don't have. Because as the leader, at the end of the day, you got to develop anybody that you hire. So whoever you choose, whether they got it or they don't have it, and you still got that, you still got to develop that person and work with that person. And I have seen so many people over my career hire their friends, and this is where the performance management comes in. The friend is not bringing to the game probably what everybody needs, and the team recognizes it. Employees will recognize it, but it's hard to deal with that person because that was that leader's friend. And then that performance management issue, that leadership issue just lingers on.
Yeah, you just
for years.
you lose credibility.
Absolutely.
You lose credibility. You know, you characterize leadership as, and the team that I'm blessed to lead, which tells me a lot about how you feel or what your definition of leadership, and it is a responsibility. You know, I've said routinely, you know, these people on your team don't work for you. You work for them.
That's right.
Your job is to provide them with everything they need to be successful. That's your job. And if in some way they're not, you've got to look at the chance that you may have contributed to that in some way.
Absolutely.
So you know, I want to go back and talk to new leaders again, because I know we've got a lot of people saying, man, I can't wait to get the wisdom that he's gotten through all these years of being in leadership, because you've accumulated a little bit here and a little bit there. Mm-hmm. You had a strategy, and I don't know if you're going to, you mentioned earlier, people don't like being blindsided. I hope I'm not blindsiding you with this. You shared with me a strategy around networking. And you told me this years ago. You were young in the business. You were wanting to do everything you could to do the best job possible and let people who could help you in your career, let them know who you were. And you had a strategy of attending speeches and then doing something. So that, see, I'm taking you back, brother, right?
You are.
and I love that, and I cannot tell you how many people I've shared that with. It's like, listen, if you want to work on networking in leadership, you should, in any job, you should constantly be doing that. Talk a little bit. I thought that strategy was brilliant, and I've shared it with lots of people.
I didn't think about it in terms of a strategy, and definitely I don't remember all aspects of it, but what is important is there are enough people that go to big meetings and are wallflowers. It's like the high school dance, and everybody stands on the wall and a few people dance. Well, you know, I remember young in my career, I would go to a meeting, I would always sit on the front row. Just to sit on the front row. Certain meetings I would go to, I always asked a question. You make it a point to ask a question. Engineers ask questions, right? I'm trained to ask questions, but I would always ask a question that was related to the topic that we were discussing. Not in a closed-ended question, but an open-ended question. What do you think about this? How might this outcome be different? Tell me your thoughts on this, or just tell me more. Can you help me understand? Open-ended questions that create a dialogue. And one thing that I've learned, that I've watched leaders, a lot of leaders that I see that are really good leaders, they love debate and dialogue. And that's kind of where that came from.
I remember that you said at times you would ask a question and then just so that you could get some one-on-one time with that person in leadership. Because a lot of people say, okay, here's the VP, or here's the CEO, or here's the COO, or I'd really like to just sit and chat with them.
Absolutely.
But what do I do? How do I bridge into that conversation? And you said I would go to their speeches, I would always ask a question, and then at the end of the speech, I would go and finish the story.
I would go up to that speaker and say, hey, thanks for answering my question. I really learned a lot. I've got a few more questions. Can we get a cup of coffee, or do you mind if I get on your calendar to discuss XYZ?
But you may not call it a strategy. I call it a brilliant strategy. I really wanted you to share that today, because there's a lot of young leaders who are going, I want to get some traction in. I want to learn from people. I'd like to get some mentors. How do you do that? Well, that's one of the easiest ways. It's a compliment in a way, the fact that I'm even attending your speech, and now I'm wanting more information from you. It's in essence just a little bit different way of saying, I want to pick your brain and have you share with me some of those really gems that you've accumulated over the years.
Well, let me be clear on why this is important. And you just learned this, again, as I reflect, and I didn't realize what I was doing at the time. But the essence of people is good. And if you appeal to someone like we're talking about and say, hey, I just want to learn, I need a little help, who's going to say no to that? That's genuine. If you're truly trying to learn and understand, I mean, everyone loves to educate somebody who asks a question. Let me help you understand why. Yes, I'll tell you more.
Right.
That kind of thing.
Right. You've made lots of transitions from pretty substantially different positions in your career. How do you go about evaluating, is this next position right for me? Is it that you're, wherever you are, you're constantly evaluating your level of happiness? What challenges am I looking for in my life now? How do you go about assessing? Because sometimes positions come open pretty quickly, and you don't have a lot of time to make a decision whether that's something you're even interested in or not. Do you kind of every so often have a conversation with yourself sitting under a tree saying, where am I in my life and in my career? What would be more fulfilling now? How can I change this job? If I were to go somewhere, where might I want to go? Do you have those kind of conversations? How do you evaluate career transitions?
Well, for me, the direction or the journey, that is what it is. And the journey is just being able to contribute at a higher level so I can support my family and do the things I love to do outside of work, period. Whether it's golf, art, travel, you name it, everything I do is to help my family do all that.
So more than a challenge, if for you, it's if I feel that I can contribute and make a real difference in this next job, that to you, if I'm hearing it correctly, that's the biggest determinant.
That's the biggest determination for me, because the job's got to make sense. And you're not going to take a person like me and stick me in marketing. It's like, I'm not sure how much value I'm going to add over there. But if you want me to go to a bigger power plant or to supply chain where I work now, yeah, that makes sense to me. And yes, I can go over there and I believe I can create some value. And so that's typically the only thing that I really think about. I want to be able to use everything that I've learned over the last 30 years of my career to help me contribute on a higher level, because I believe I can. From the challenge standpoint, I think we all like challenges. The engineer in me, I love challenges. I love starting new things. I love paving my own way and creating things. So, I mean, I get that. In every job, I treat it like that. But as long as it's on that same direction of where I just think my career or personally where I want to be, as long as I stay on that journey, I'm good. I'm good. I firmly believe what's for you is for you. You don't have to go chase it. And as I think about my career, the jobs I chased, I probably wasn't happy in. But as I sat still, the right jobs always came along. And I know I was good at them because they were the right jobs.
And you knew as they came your way, that's a good fit for me. That's a place I can add value. I know myself. I know where I'm going to be good. I know where I'm not going to be good, and you avoid those.
Absolutely.
You know,
I know I don't have a lot of patience. So I know what jobs I'm not going to go into that's going to require that patience.
You mentioned earlier about
Know what I'm saying?
a lot of us are there. You mentioned earlier about this is a demanding job. There's not enough time, to necessarily get everything done all the time. It takes a toll on people. I want to flip that over. What's been the biggest reward for you, and maybe even an unexpected reward? This was a surprise to me. I knew leadership was going to bring with it these things, but this one really surprised me, and gladly surprised me.
Well, it gets back to people. It's one thing to sit and talk to you, or sit and talk to a mentoring group and say it's about people. But until you've been in a leadership role like this, that's very demanding and it's very time consuming, and you're still trying to produce certain outcomes through people, you're trying to develop other leaders, because that's what sustains companies, developing other leaders. When you see where you've helped others grow, when you see the path that you've created behind you of other leaders, that's what I see today. That gives me the most joy, the most benefit. I sit back often and I reflect, and as much as I talk on the phone to people I've worked with in the past and people I work with today, and they tell me about their successes, and then we collaborate with each other, working on just issues that they're struggling with, or they may see me struggling with an issue and they say, well, Johnny, let me help you for a change. Think about it this way. You're thinking about it the wrong. Those are the most rewarding things to you. And so until you get to this point, you can have that feeling, because it gets to be warm right here in your heart, and you realize I did it the right way. My career was great. All the things happened for the right reason. I've impacted people. Those relationships will carry you past retirement. Those are real relationships.
So now we've got a real challenge. If we're really buying into the fact of taking care of people and helping them be successful in any way that you can. Now we're living in a remote society. Now we're doing everything virtually. And to me, that is a brand new challenge for a lot of people. Granted, there are some leaders who've had a portion of their team where they manage them remotely, but now it may be the whole team. Mm-hmm. Biggest challenge, biggest suggestion for other managers based on how you handled that issue?
Well, the biggest challenge is staying connected with people such that you can continue to nurture the relationships that you've built. You got to build these relationships every day, and this pandemic has forced all of us to figure out how to do it differently virtually. The other thing I've told a lot of people is if you didn't have good relationships going into this pandemic, then it's pretty tough on you right now to lead your team. But I tell you, I have seen a lot of things, done a lot of things. It's just been different. I remember when we first started in the pandemic, I would get everybody on Skype was the tool we were using at the time, and we'd get together at 7, 8 o'clock at night after some people have put the kids to bed and other people have gotten rid of chores. And I said, get your favorite drink. We're going to sit here on Skype and we're going to catch up. And we'd ask questions like, who's cooked the best meal thus far? Or who's had the best grill? Do you use a green egg grill, and things like that. But I would tell you, it gets to be tiring because it's a time commitment. And it is now for me transitioned to just picking up the phone and calling and saying, hey, I was in that meeting with you today. You didn't know I was logged in listening, but that was pretty damn good what you talked about. Thank you for that.
Personal touch beyond just the virtual Zoom call, Skype call, whatever. Yeah. We talked a little bit earlier about that, about the tendency of companies to, linger here in this Zoom world, and we're thinking people may be a little tired of it, and they're missing that personal touch. So picking up the telephone, just that added, hey, I heard you, I appreciate it, that was pretty good, gotta go. Doesn't even have to be long,
does it? Doesn't have to be long. And they're not expecting it. So when you call somebody out of the blue, just to say something like that, think about the impact that has. Think about that.
I completely agree. In my leadership class, I talk about it. One of the things that tends to make a difference more than anything else is when appreciative feedback, pats on the back, come unexpectedly. If you did a great job, and at the end of every meeting, I'm going to say, Johnny, you did a great job. Okay, it's coming. But boy, when I get that phone call out of the blue, it makes a big difference.
Absolutely.
I know that you are thinking about writing a book, and and whenever you do that, my friend, I'm going to have you back on the show because I really want to find out what you have to say are the main principles of leadership, how you deliver that, and give a chance to promote that for you. But any last thoughts for the listeners on leadership from your years of experience?
Well, since you brought that up, and you and I are so close, you know what I'm thinking all the time, and I've got a lot of great stories, and I've been in a lot of challenging situations. I think what I'll leave your audience with is with 5 bullets that kind of frame up the essence of what I think leadership is, and I'm pretty sure you'll see these words written again with more detail.
Right.
But the first one, I would say from a leadership perspective, is you have to be strategic. So earlier in the show, we talked about being able to see around corners. After you've developed yourself and you're constantly learning, you can see around corners to drop those nuggets. The first one is you got to be strategic. The second one, I would say, is that you have to lead practically. And when you think about that, leading practically means being able to get people put in the right position. They're in the right position or working on the right thing at the right time. They understand the strategy where everything fits in, all that kind of stuff. So leading practically. The third thing I would say is have a sense of realism. See the world for what it is and not for what you want it to be. And I see a lot of leaders make that mistake, I think. They don't think it's a mistake. It's probably wrong for me to call it a mistake, but you got to see the situation for, okay, it's really either this bad or sometimes it's really this good, and you don't need to do nothing just because you're the leader.
Leave it well enough alone.
Leave it well enough alone and ride it for a little bit. Anytime I go to a new job, I don't do anything for 6 months. I sit and watch and try to understand, is it really this good, or do we really have this much work to do?
Right.
The fourth bullet I would say is, and this really applies to what's happening in society today, but have a sense of empathy. Really be able to put yourself in other people's shoes and understand why they feel the way they feel. Quick story, I remember shutting down one of our plants and had to deliver that message, and I saw firsthand what empathy really means and the impact it has on folks. Mm-hmm. And when you think about these days, this is the 1-year anniversary of George Floyd and his just tumultuous murder on TV. I think America's figuring out what empathy really is. Mm-hmm. But then last but not least, and I said this earlier, but I want to highlight it again, I think it's the great note to close on because you're a great friend, you got a great business, and we've worked together for a long time. But this notion of being optimistic is incredible. As a leader, you have to be optimistic, regardless of the situation, how bad it is or how good it is. If it's good, it can be better. If it's bad, we're going to get through it. The sun's going to shine tomorrow.
Right,
we're going to wake up. We're going to get through it. But the spirit of optimism is so contagious. And when employees buy in to that belief that tomorrow is going to be better than today, it's amazing what any team can accomplish.
I love that as an ending note, the optimism. I'm optimistic enough that you've dropped some seeds on those last 5 principles that I've said I've got to have you back to talk about that because as you were talking about my wheels were already turning about some questions I want to ask. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so we'll have to have you back another time. Johnny, it has been a real pleasure.
Greg, this was fun, man. This was
fun. It really was.
Absolutely. Anything you need. This is fun.
All right. And that's it for another edition of Big in Biz with DiViz. I'm Craig DiVizzio. Thanks for watching. Till next time, stay cool, have good thoughts. See ya.